Robert, you were going to tell us about where you first lived in Golden. Where was your parents' first home?
It was only on 10th Avenue down here that we lived for a while. When they first came over, they went to Lake Louise. He was logging there. And then they came here, and they lived over there. And then they went to Sycamores for a year or so. And then they come back. I don't remember that, but I got pictures of me and my sisters, because I was too young then. Mm-hmm. And then they bought this house over here at the end of the street, and we lived in there the rest of my life till I met her.
And when did you meet her?
In 1966. Oh. We met in April, we got married in December.
Nice. Short romance?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do the math on that. How long have you been married then?
60, that'd be 48 or 49 this year?
Yeah.
49 in
49.
End of the year.
My goodness. Good for you. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
And in good health?
Well, yeah.
Mostly?
She's doing pretty good for her age.
Yeah.
Her mother lived to be 100.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know if she'll make it or not.
But at any rate, you've had her around a good long time.
Yeah. And I got back problems in my eye, last fall. I gave up my driver's license.
So, because you lived right in Golden all of your years, all of your early years anyway, can you tell me about where you went to school and maybe who some of your teachers were and your playmates at school?
Oh yes, I walked by the street here in the summertime, probably, because in the winter I walked the other way because of the snow. But I went to Lady Gray, the first one. And then when I worked on the construction in 1953 of the new Lady Gray, that burnt down, 2 years later? And now they got another Lady Gray there. So there was 12 grades there, and most of the rooms, it was 4 rooms. One had 2 teachers, 1 and 2, grade 1 and 2. Another room had 3, 4, and 5. That was Mrs. Sanborn was my first teacher in 1 and 2, and Ethel King was my second one, 3 and 4 and 5, and 6, grade 6. I had a lady from Miss Taylor. I think she was from Australia or New Zealand, one or the other. And in grade 7 and 8 and 9 were together in another room. And that was Louis Wells and Lawrence Gregg. And in grade 10, 11, and 12, I think they were both in both rooms there, those 2 teachers. Mostly Mr. Wells taught the high school. There was only 12 grades. And most of we only went to grade 8 and 9, that's all. By the time they got to grade 8, I don't know, we went. We went and found work, I guess. That was during the war, so it was easy to find a job. I was out fighting forest fires when I was 14. I wasn't going to school then either. I was finished. And then I started with CPR when I was 15 on the track in Golden here. I worked there for 3 years, but I wanted to be a brakeman, but they wouldn't hire anybody till they got 21, so I wasn't going to wait 3 years for that.
Dad and I went up the field and talked to the foreman in the roundhouse, and yeah, he can go to work. So I finished school here another week or so, and I went up the field. So the first week I was fine. I was getting used to the layout of, you know, everything that was in there around the roundhouse, the tracks and that. So worked there that week. Then the next week, you come to work at midnight. That's how the railway operates, you know. It runs all year,
Yeah.
all hours. So after 3 months, I broke in and learned the ropes, and then I got to be a call boy, light up man, and all that different stuff in the roundhouse, filling lubricators and calling crews, running around fields, calling crews.
Right to their houses.
See, every train that went out of field, every freight had 4 engines on it. 3 pushers and a road engine. So you had 8 men to call every time a train went east. And they weren't in the roundhouse. You had to go uptown and call them in the middle of the night. Go into their room and wake them up. And here, you're
Their bedroom.
is this your name? You're so and so. Yeah, you're called for such and such a time. Usually an hour and a half or 2 hours time. You know, for them to get up, eat, get lunch, and come down to the shop and get ready to go. Oh yeah, everybody had to have a watch. That was if you were on the road, on the running trade. You had to have a special watch.
And the jeweler come
Took a
and,
couple of months' wages just to pay for the watch
yes.
in those days.
Yeah.
You
And
know.
the jeweler came from Revelstoke and would check them, didn't he?
Here, yeah.
Yeah.
Us fellows that were out here, Beavermouth, Notch Hill, the different pusher points, you know. He made his rounds, and he's the one that adjusted the watches. Yeah, we never touched the watch. He did all that. And then being at a different altitude here than Revelstoke, see, we're 1,000 feet higher than Revelstoke here. Well, he'd have to adjust that because the watch wasn't running right. Yeah, those fellows at Beavermouth were higher yet, you know, climbing up to Rogers Pass.
Yeah.
Well, they'd adjust the watches there too. You know. Then after so many months, he took your watch, he'd give you a loaner, and took your watch in and serviced it in the shop, you know. Then the next time he came out, I think he came out every 2-3 weeks, he'd bring your watch out, and you got your own watch back, and he took the loaner. Yeah, and when we left on the road, I fired, when I was firing out of field, well, I had to take field for one instance, no matter where we were going out. When you signed out in the roundhouse, before you got on the engine, you signed and you looked at the clock on the wall. And that was a standard clock set by a telegraph
Oh.
in those days. And now it's radio, you know, you hear the time
Yeah.
on the radio. Well, they set that, and then you took your watch and you looked at it, and you were allowed 20 seconds, one way or the other. Well, sometimes it was more, but you didn't touch it. The jeweler did that. And then you marked down how many seconds your clock was out, your watch was out, before you even got on the engine. It was on paper with our signature. And then before we left the yard, we were already hooked on the train and ready to go. The whole train crew, the engineman, fireman, front brakeman, the head tail end brakeman, and the conductor were all in the engine. And we all pulled our watch out and compared the time, how many seconds were out. And then that was every trip.
How many trains did you have through Golden, and passenger trains, how many were there?
Oh, how many passenger trains? At that time there was 6. 3 each way. That's coast to coast.
Right.
Yeah.
And today we have
None.
I've always been interested in equipment. My dad brought a little cat in Calgary, brought it into McMurdo on the train, and when he put it on the ground, I run that back up to the farm. We drove it from McMurdo to the farm, and I was 12 years old at that time. I played with trucks in the banks and moved dirt, and that was the thing I did. I worked with my dad a lot. I always was with Dad doing things. When my two younger brothers were out doing other things, I was usually working with Dad. I drove tractors when I was really young. I loaded manure, I backed trailers through fences. I started running tractors and stuff when I was probably 8 or 10 years old. So eventually worked through that. I peeled poles for Arkansas when I was in school, and some of it was on contract, and I did quite well at it. I worked hard, and I was always quite interested in making money, and so go like crazy, and I could make some pretty good money in comparison. After that, I went. I worked for Garrett Wise in above. He had a bush mill. I canted in the mill during the daytime. There was one fellow that was logging for the mill, and he was doing it by himself. He'd fall the trees and skid them with a D6 cat and feed the mill, but it was a big job for him to keep up. And he didn't live far away from us, and the job was pretty close to home. It was within a mile of home. So I went out after work, at night, and would go, and I could run the cat. So I'd go and run the cat and skid logs, and I was probably 17 at the time. And then from there, that was for Wise as well. And then from there, I went to the Blairberry and run cat. By the time it was 1968, I bought my own D6 cat. I logged for Palumbo's on the Mount, and then above Addison's place at Arkansas, the old Arkansas plug. I worked up on the mountain there skidding logs. Kept working my way up. Eventually went into land clearing. Brush blade on the cat, went land clearing. Worked for the Wolfendens in Briscoe and stuff like that. And of course, Kathy, my wife, is a Wolfenden, and that we had met before that because the Wolfens were also in the cattle business, and my dad and that sold cattle back and forth with them, and so we knew each other before that. But once I got into land clearing, they were clearing that's about the time that the Shirley business was going really good, and they were spending a lot of money on land clearing and stuff. So I got into land clearing with cats. Like I said, 1968, probably by 1969 I was into clearing land and that. Once I remember some land clearing from way back when my dad had some done, and the guy left the big stump holes and everything else in such a mess. I thought we worked like slaves trying to level that out, and I thought if I ever go land clearing or whatever, I'm never going to make a mess like that. So I was always pretty careful about making sure the holes were done, and I learned to what we call comb the ground. So after I'd cleared, I'd run the teeth through it and then back drag them so that there was loose soil, leveled, and so that they just had to drag a drag around to level it, and they could seed it down, especially for pasture land. If they wanted it for hay field, they'd have to pick a few sticks, but it made it so that they could get it into production pretty easy. And Wolfendens and that scene, I did that. He advertised it around the valley, and so the rest of the farmers, I stayed very busy doing that for quite a period of time. We also got into what we called the agriculture. It was a program where you could get land from the government. It was Crown land, and if you did the clearing and the improvements on it, you could buy the land. So quite a few of the people got into that. We got to doing the logging during the winter, so it kept us busy in the winter, and we had the clearing jobs during the summer. So it was something that we worked on. We went from a D6 to a D7. So I had 2 cats at this time doing different stuff. So we grew there. Then we got into a D8 when I got into partner, and I took Gary Hibbert in as a partner with me on that at that time. So then we got into a D8 and then cruised, and he ran D8 most of the time and did other things, but we cabled on the Sioux Fire. We went into doing a lot of blocks for the sawmill. Back at that time it was, I guess, Evans Products for slash burning, and so we just constantly grew on that kind of stuff. And we log during the winter. We'd done road construction, got into the road construction part of it. So, yeah, we eventually grew to have 16 machines at one time. So,
I'm one of many hundreds, maybe even thousands, of people who were born and lived some portion of their life on the prairies. I was born at Ponoka, north of, I was actually born in Wetaskiwin, but we lived in Ponoka, north of Red Deer. And many people on the prairies eventually decided to go to the Promised Land. And the Promised Land was BC. And so I lived there. We lived in Ponoka until 1956, until I was 10 years old. And then my folks came to Invermere to go sawmilling. And so we left an agricultural area. And at that time, oil was still very new in Alberta. So it was primarily a farming country. Almost everybody was a farmer in those days. And so we left that and came to BC, where again, almost everybody was in the forest industry. And the only things that changed the tempo of the forest industry as it went along through the year, usually, were forest fires. Because people worked at big sawmills, such as at Radium or at Canal Flats, until a fire happened, and then they went fighting fire for a little while during the summer. And then, of course, the rest of the year carried on. My folks had a sawmill of their own, as many small operators were at that time. They had a sawmill where they cut primarily railway ties. And all up and down the valley, from Golden, Donald to Kimberley, and probably past that. There were tie mills all over. And so they were small operators who would usually do their own logging and their sawmilling. And that was in addition to the big sawmills, there were all kinds of those small sawmills. And that's what my folks had. And so we went to the Invermere area, but specifically to the little town of Wilmer, which is just north of Invermere. And I went all through my high school there. And while I was there as a kid, I worked in a general store, in a country store. There were two, if you can believe. If you know Wilmer, it's a very small town. But there were two stores there. And it was because the local people in that town bought a lot of their merchandise there, and they bought everything there, from shoes to milk and groceries. And so I was doing that when I was 12 years old till I was 16. And then I started working for my dad, peeling and packing railway ties, and working on the sawmill too, as I did many summers. But it was that kind of a life that many people in the valley had. The valley in those days, and throughout the valley's history, usually it's always been a good place to live, in the sense that if people wanted to work, there were jobs. And so that's the life I grew up in. I graduated from high school in 1964. I found my wife in high school in 1964, and then we were married in 66. And so we've been together for a few years, and I went to college in the States and graduated from there in 68 with a degree in business. From there, we went to Toronto for 6 years, just purely on a lark. We were two country kids that had grown up, and we hadn't even ridden in a taxi, let alone a train or an airplane or anything like that. So we took off one day in October of 1968 and didn't know where we were going. We knew we were going to Ontario, but we didn't know any more than that. And we had a credit card in our pocket, and I think $500, and we left. And we ended up in Toronto, and I worked for IBM there for 6 years. I managed an office in downtown Toronto, an IBM sales office, for 4 years, and I ran a staff training program across Canada for 2 years from 72 to 74. Then, it's funny how sometimes the small events or things in your life that seem small can change your life. And that's what happened with us. I guess I'd kind of come to the end of my time at IBM in that I had had the best job in the company for me, not for everybody else, but for me it was the best job. I wasn't a technical person. I was never going to climb the ladder at IBM. And I had had that job that I really enjoyed for a couple of years, but I could see that I wanted to do something else. And probably wanted to be in business for myself, and that's probably because I grew up in that business, you know, in that situation where my folks basically had their own business with a tie mill. So, but the other factor that really changed that was that we were down there, our families were out here, our kids had no grandparents, no aunts, no uncles, no cousins, no anything. And so we really wanted to come back out here. It had always been our intention to come back after 2 years, and then we stayed 6. So we came back, and by that time my folks had moved from Wilmer to Golden, and so we came here.
For some reason, I can't remember exactly what it was, we decided to start the Damn Advertiser, a little giveaway paper, an advertiser. We didn't pay for it. It started in 1964. I was 7 months pregnant with my 3rd child, so I wasn't much help initially, but I do remember all kinds of stuff in our kitchen. Papers all over the floor. I did a lot of the artistic stuff, doing advertisements and so on that we were able to get. And cranking the hand Gestetner. We used a hand Gestetner. At that time, we finally graduated to an electric one. We moved to a couple of spots in Golden, you know, running that advertiser. And then in 1969, we were approached by a friend who said we should be starting a newspaper rather than an advertiser. So we joined company with Clayton Stacey and ended up putting out the Golden Gazette. We ended up, we actually had a fire. We had at that time bought the old buildings on Gould's Island, and we had a fire there. And we missed one issue. Next issue we put out from the upstairs in our little house, which is now the Century House, and carried on. He left shortly after that to pursue other interests, and we carried on running the Golden Gazette for many years. And I had good staff, so I thought, oh, in 1979, 1980, I thought, oh, I'm going to try and buy the Golden Star out. I loved newspapering. I'd learned a lot from just experience. I ran the press from time to time. I did a lot of darkroom work, photography, interviewing people, the whole gamut. Which makes a business successful is being able to, cover all your bases and do every step that is required in any business. And I think a lot of people today don't realize that. But anyway, that's how life has changed. So anyway, I got the realtor to go and approach the Golden Star, who was run by, I think, Nakamura, I think, ran it at the time. And I thought, oh, I'll just buy them out and I'll have the exclusive newspaper in Golden because I love doing it. Well, things just didn't happen the way I thought. So lo and behold, they turned around and asked to buy me out, which sort of floored me. But when I get a decision to make in my life, I really think about it. At night, you sort of mull over everything in your mind and you think, okay, what am I going to do if I sell? But the price was right. So I thought, okay, I will sell out and get out of newspapering. Lo and behold, if Clayton Stacey and his wife Lucille didn't appear back on the scene and said, let's start a newspaper again. So I thought, oh, well, I really enjoyed it. And this 5 years that you're supposed to not do the same job again had gone by. And I thought, okay, I will go and we'll start it up again. So we did the Golden Times. And again, it was paid for. It wasn't a freebie. And it's hard to get subscriptions. You know, you have to really work at getting them. But into 2 months of being with them. My job was going to be to do some darkroom work and write a column. I ended up doing most of the work, and they spent their time elsewhere, and I just said, look, this isn't going to work. I need to just buy you out and do it on my own. So I did that, and until 1989, and lo and behold. Oh, what we did was we changed sort of, or I changed the format. I decided we're going to give it away again, because that's a way to get people to read it, and you don't have to go after subscriptions. So I called it the Golden Valley Times, and I dropped them off all along the way. In the meantime, we were getting it printed in Cranbrook, so it was really efficient to drop them off along the way, and then just disperse them in Golden. So it sort of posed a threat to the company that had bought out the Golden Star, I guess, because they could see what I was doing, and they're the same group basically that had bought me out the first time, or they were behind the money anyway. So I said, when they approached me to buy me out, I said, okay, whatever. Paid me the same amount they paid me the first time. I said, okay. So off I went.
Out in Waybury, we had Steve Petruch's store along the highway there, and that was a great treat to get to go down to Steve's, and we'd get to go over to the Coke cooler, and the lid would open up, and you'd reach in and pull out your cold pop with water dripping off of it, and open it up and enjoy your pop, and a visit with Steve, who always had hotcakes. Every day that man ate hotcakes. He was just having some hotcakes. And if you got down there and he was closed, you'd walk down from his house and open up. And if you got gas, you always got a 2-cent deal. He put 2 cents more in and not charge you. It was so fun. I didn't know a lot about Steve. He was a bachelor, and he lived on hotcakes, and he had he loved to visit. And he liked to have duck at Christmas, so somebody would cook him a duck at Christmas time, and he'd have duck. And he had fish in the little creek just down from his house that also ran into the Columbia River. And we get a treat by going to feed these fish cheese, because of course the store had a big cheese wheel, and there was probably hard cheese from that wheel. And we get to feed the fish cheese. And he never talked of his family in the old country. I'm not even certain what his old country was. He was always, he made sure he had a hot chocolate machine there to entice the kids in, and chocolate bars that melted and froze. And there was no expiry dates on any of his produce. We just bought it and enjoyed it, whether it be white. That was Steve. It was always great to go down there, and sometimes the other neighbors would be there, so you'd get to catch up. The guys with Dad and whoever was there, some other logging people from the area. And that's where I got to catch my first fish. Not out of his creek, but I went down to the mouth of the Columbia and I caught my first.
People may not know or remember that across the road, I think it was from Steve's, was a ceramics store.
Yeah.
For a time. Do you remember anything about it?
I remember the building, but I don't remember ever being in the building. But I do know across the road from Steve's was an outhouse, and each side they had the girls' side and the boys' side. And you could use that if you need to. But, yeah. And CP had a building and an outhouse too, just in behind that store, down by their tracks. CP had a building there. I think it was mainly a storage shed. I don't remember people living at it, but I remember the building being there. And then Bergenham's are just down the road from Steve's. And I remember Johnny Bergenham being our library, and he'd show up with a car. And you would go out to the trunk of the car and check through the books, and you got to keep them for a couple weeks, and then he'd come back and you could exchange a book for a new book. It was great fun to have Johnny Bergenham show up with his library. And sometimes you'd get the folder brush salesman, the walk-in salesman, and the Raleigh salesman was my Uncle Ken, so that wasn't as fun. And at one time in the Blaeberry, we had a milkman who would go door to door delivering milk and ice cream and stuff like that for a few years. I don't remember who the gentleman was, but I remember we had one. I remember Johnny being an older gentleman, and then Caroline, and then their mom was there when we went there to get manure or borrow haying parts or something. Dad would go there. They had a lot of cats in their house. A lot of cats. I remember that. And their house having a dirt floor when we went there as kids, and we thought they were so poor. These poor people had a dirt floor. But they seemed to do just fine.
I was born in Hamilton, Ontario in 1930. And I was raised pretty well in Peterborough and 40 miles north of Peterborough in a little village called Apsley. My wife calls it Apsilly. But yeah, the Apsley Bancroft area, it's tourist, lots of lakes. And I progressed from there after working with my dad in the bush. I was 13, I believe, when he needed me to pull the crosscut in the bush. And summertime, you had to work in the sawmill in the summertime because you didn't have machinery then, you had the horses. And from there, I worked for Ontario Hydro for a while, and when that was shutting down, they had 150 men to a camp. And when that shut down, my dad said, let's take my old 37 Ford and head out to Alberta and see my brother Duke and brother John. So we did, and we come out there in 1949 and went to Forestburg, and that's where Duke was, working for the farmers there. Had a little party there at Ramona's mom and dad's place. Had some music, and I was chording on a laptop guitar for my dad. And I knew the songs very well, but there was a little girl out in the kitchen with her head around the corner winking at me. And I was making a few mistakes, and my dad said, don't you know those songs yet? Anyway, next day we went to Edmonton, looking for work, and that didn't pan out. Came back to Forestburg. So anyway, at Forestburg, I worked in the coal mines pretty well all the time. Worked 5-6 months on oil rigs. And we got married in 1950 and progressed from there. I was there about 6 years, I guess. And went looking for work, and I ended up in Golden, up in the Blaeberry. Little camp there. And that same winter of '56, I brought Ramona and the kids up in there to that camp, and she said, "Where in the hell are you taking me?" I said, "We're going to live right under that mountain up there." "Oh, Lord, living under no mountain." But we did. We survived and raised the kids there for that winter, and moved on out to the OB campground area there. We had a little cabin there. And that's when we brought Harold out, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And Harold worked in the planer mill there. In the spring, we moved on into Golden, and we lived right where the telephone building is there now.
Okay.
And there was a little shanty there we lived in. And progressed from there. Worked on the Trans-Canada Highway for half, I guess. Was foreman, labor foreman there. Went to Rogers, used to have to go in and out by train. And I went from there to Jasper, and they wanted me to go to northern Alberta, and I quit. Back to Golden. So we bought a place out in the Blayberry there in 1960.
60.
We bought the farm out there, and that's where we ended up raising our kids. We still miss it. But
I don't.
I do. I liked it out there. I liked the view of the mountains there. Golden's been a pretty good place for us. Been happy. Kids are healthy and happy, so can't ask for too much more.
I want to say a little bit of history about the family first. Because Grandpa came over, and I was talking to Auntie Dixie, the youngest one of the Van Hoopens, and she said it was 1910. And then there was in 1911 is when Grandma came over, because he couldn't afford to get him right away, and he was told it was paved with gold in Canada. So he left a very good job in Holland to come to Canada. He thought he was going to get his family raised, and so he had to leave the two older ones, and they were 4 and 5 in Holland, and Auntie Lena and Uncle Pete. And then he brought Uncle Joe and Uncle Chris came with Grandma. And when she got here, it was in 1911, and there was, she said at least 5-6 feet of snow, 30 below. She lived on 10th Street, where Garb's old house used to be close by there. And she used 47 buckets of water to clean that place because the mice poop was everywhere and there were stars you could see and she thought, why did I come to this country? So naturally she had Mum, who was born in 1912, and Mum was born at home, and then they moved down on 10th Street. That house is still there, and that's where Grandpa was only 42 when he died, so Uncle Joe took over and raised that family, and Uncle Chris then had gone to Vancouver, and Auntie Lena, but the promise was one would come back and take over. Well, it never happened. At first it bothered my uncle, but then he thought, well, he was an angel. There was no other word for it. And Grandma, they came every Sunday for supper, every Sunday. Now, our Grandma was an angel, but she didn't step in and watch us kids or come over. That usually was Auntie Dixie had to do those things. And then, naturally, my mom and dad got married, but I think the real little history of that is Milam's, where Sears Stores is. That's where Paul Milam lived, and that was a real good friend of my dad's, and my mom used to visit there, and that's where they met. And then Polly's named after him, Paul and Carrie, their name was, and that she's named after them. And so anyway, then they got married, and like Polly said, Dad was in the service a lot. So Mom was on her own a lot, so Uncle Joe took over actually 2 families. And Grandma, during the war, I got to just say this before I finish that, Grandma lost, was it 42 relatives in the Second World War. A son and a wife, and going to have a baby, and 6 children, and lots of nieces and nephews. Mom was only 10 when her dad died, so think of Uncle Joe, a young man, taking over a family and raising it, and there wasn't welfare like people depend on now and all this stuff, but like our mom used to always say, she thought there was more sharing. If you had sugar, she'd give you butter or whatever. And we used to have Mrs. Broad across the street, and I could still remember them sharing. Mrs. Broad would bring Mom butter or vice versa. So it was probably a closer connection in a sense. Mm-hmm.
Could you talk a little bit about Uncle Ben?
Ben Hines?
Yeah, because I didn't know Ben Hines. I remember meeting him when I was a small child,
Yeah,
but I knew nothing, as an adult, I know nothing about him, and I'm really interested.
yeah. Well, he was one of a kind. I tell you that. He had a trap line, and he used to like me to come up in the evening, and he'd make a cup of tea, and then Saturday or so, he'd always want me to come up, and help him do a few things. And he made, when you went there, you eat, because he'd just, and I had a plate, good plate. When I left, he turned it over, because he had a lot of cats. And I went back again in next week, and he said, "Oh, stay for lunch, dinner," he said. "Just turn your plate over, it's ready to go." Yeah. Yeah, quite a guy. He worked for the CPR a little bit too in the summer months. Just a seasoned man, and they'd give him money for the winter until he started getting pension and stuff like that. And then there was a lot of people, a lot of the older timers would come there in the evening, and they'd play poker and one thing another like that. And it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was he ever married?
No,
I didn't think so.
no. No, I remember the last day I seen him, he told me he stopped in the morning, "I'm going to fry some bacon breakfast for you." I had breakfast, but we were working very close on the Phillips property. So, a young guy like me, I didn't refuse it. And he made it and ate it. And he said, "I'm going up the hill there today." He said, "I'm going to set a lynx trap." He said, I'll just take the old tractor and go right up. Well, I said, "You be careful." So anyway, when it come quitting time, I come back. I thought I'd stop and see how he made out. He wasn't home. So I had a little four-wheel drive, a little Toyota four-wheel drive. I just took off up the hill after him, and I found him up there. He's on his hands and knees, and he had a trap set, and he was just driving the stakes in,
Oh,
and there he was.
there he was.
Yeah. And Dorothy Wardwell, you had to go by their place. And Dorothy said, "When I seen you going up," she said, I knew there was something.
Yeah.
So I got him in the back of the car. That thing, it was very short, it was only, but I got him in and took him home. Put him in the room, put some wood in the fire, warmed it up a little bit in there. Then I followed the police and ambulance and all that stuff. So they came out right away.
That must have been a difficult task for you when you were so close to him.
Yeah.
After the war, I ended up for a year and a half in Poland, 47 to 48, and where you died with my family in 1948. I never seen Dad again since 45. We got separated. But year and a half in Poland was a real eye-opener because the Poles that came into East Prussia to take over the country were not the most, how shall I put it nicely, not the most honest people. As they took whatever they could from you, and you had no choice. Even the militia came at night with gun pointed to rob what we had. But then from 45 to 47, there was nothing as far as government or business, no stores, no nothing. We had a population of 770 people, but after the war, when I came back, there were 75 people, or the other people had left. You know. Then 47, 47, the Poles moved in, and they started to run the country, and we started working for the Poles to clean up the forest that the grenades had damaged, and we earned about, there was 4 of us from with my uncle and 3 nephews, or cousins I should say. We earned about a loaf of bread a day. But we were glad to have that because we got a few zlotys, which was the currency of the Polish regime. Then in 47, the Pole that came to my uncle's farm, that came to the brother, and they came and picked up equipment from our farm or from the area to take back. And the brother, he asked me if I want to go and watch cows for him on the farm. And my uncle, we were a family of 9, a lot of cows to feed, and I agreed, and that was real, the Poles that you would say were just as average as anybody else. They were not the Poles that tried to settle in East Prussia. No, that was good experience. Even my uncle, when they were forced out in 48, the little they had on the station, they were robbed at that time, even still, you know. But I was promised 50 zlotys a month at the farm I went. I never seen the 50 zlotys because the family was as poor as a church mouse. They couldn't afford. And they had pigs. They sold the pigs and bought a pound of bacon back. They couldn't afford to butcher, except when a couple of pigs died on red fever. They were cleaned up and they were consumed, which I at first didn't want to do, but see, the others didn't die, so I ate it too. Yeah. But then the mayor next town, he heard about a German being there, free labor. They came and got me with a policeman on a bicycle and planted bayonet and picked me up to take to the town to work for the mayor. But the farmer, he didn't want to lose me so easy. He brought a pound of butter to the police chief, and I went back to the farm. But a week like that, they hauled me back to the mayor's office. So I was traded at one point for a pound of butter. After that, I went mining in field. I thought it was a good way to make a living. But so I worked there in mine and field, underground and in the concentrator. Back in them days, you didn't have much of a choice. They offered you a job and you'd done it, whether you were underground or on top or what you were doing. So I moved to Nelson, and I quickly come to the conclusion that mining was not for me. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life underground. So come back to Parson and got into the logging business. And I enjoyed every minute of it. I really did. I felled trees, drove cat, drove truck. You done any job that was handed to you. And I was next door to the Parson mechanical shop. And Alex Gerdoff was the man, and he hated tune-up. So after supper for something to do, I used to go up there and help him. And he got some books and tried to teach me how to tune up. And that's where basically I started on my mechanical repair life. And I don't know, I got tired of the bush. I realized I come to Golden and I take a look around, and there was a lot of people who never made the money I did, and they were living a lot better life. They had houses and cars. And so I thought, well, I better take try a chance at this making mechanical for a while. Well, I worked from one shop to another, and Charlie Collins was what was he called in the hospital? He was the administrator. And they were building a new hospital, so he asked me if I would come in and help out while the building was going on. So that's fine. I worked in there for 2 or 3 years, and when I came out of there, I decided to build my own garage, and I could control the quality of work and the honesty of the jobs that went out. And so I built my own shop, and we were there for, I guess, 20 years. Yeah. I built the garage, and I enjoyed every minute of it, because mechanical work is quite a challenge, and you're never doing the same job 2 days in a row. It's always something different. But I enjoyed every bit of it. And I don't know, I've very few regrets. I have a lot of friends that over the years, it's a little hard to describe, but they're true friends and have known me all my life. And I guess I should have mentioned I got married 50-some years ago, and still living with the same woman, and we've enjoyed a great life. We have 2 kids, 2 grandchildren, and fortunately we see them quite a bit. But I don't know, Golden is a great place. A lot of people speak negatively of it. But it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. I have been on a few overseas holidays, and there's nothing there in Europe that I would ever want to live over there for. In this country, we have the greatest freedoms, and
opportunities that you can get anywhere. Anyway, I'm very, feel myself very fortunate and very happy to have had the opportunity to live in Golden.
I started to work, where will I start with starting to work? I started to work when I was only 15 years old, and I worked first for Marie Rowan, who had the restaurant at the Golden Lodge. And I worked for her for maybe 3 months while I was in high school. And I got the job simply, I think, because I was going out with her son at the time. And so she needed somebody, so I was able to help her with that. Of course, I was too young to be able to serve alcohol, so she would still have to come out, pardon me, from the kitchen to go to the bar window I could order, but I couldn't carry it to the table. So she would, I would order and then she'd have to come out to deliver it to the table. So it was good. It gave me some experience, and then she decided that she wasn't going to run the business any longer, but she wanted me to be able to continue to work. So she phoned George Polis up the Hilltop, and she said that she had this girl, me, who had some experience, but that I could use a lot more, and she thought I might be a good fit. Well, I remember with terror the first time I met George Polis, because I had heard so many things about him and how hard he was to work for, and he was mean and he would make you cry, so forth. And all of that was true, by the way. He did make me cry, but he also was a really great trainer, and I learned so well at the hands of the master, as did so many young girls in Golden. They got their start if they were going to wait tables. It was George and Gus who trained a lot of young people and gave them a chance, gave them jobs when they couldn't have gotten jobs anywhere else probably, but they were willing to put in the training. But I know that I wasn't the only one that they made cry. But at the end of the day, they were loyal to us. And if we needed anything, they were always there to help us out. And so I worked for George for, I think, about 12 years, off and on. After babies were born, I'd go back to work and so forth. But I worked through the rest of my high school, and they would pick me up from high school at 3:30 and take me up so I could start my 4 o'clock shift. And so they were committed to us as much as we were to them. And at that point in time, the Hilltop was a pretty happening cafe. It was the place that everybody went in town, really. And it was a truck stop as well. There, below the Hilltop Cafe, there was a truck stop repair shop down there, Roger Ryu, and I think maybe his brother Louis. There were several brothers. I don't know if they were all involved in that operation or not. But, well, I worked in the Hilltop Cafe. My brother and cousins, Wayne and Jean Randy, and my brother Ed, worked in the service station. So we could carpool back and forth to work. And, well, I shouldn't say that. I didn't have a driver's license till I was 20. I rode with them. So, but it was kind of a close-knit group of people that we worked with up there. And I always worked with people who I knew from high school, so that was kind of nice. And there were a couple of older ladies that worked there all the years I was there and beyond. Even I'm thinking of Henny Pye, who worked there for so many years, And anyway, we worked in that operation was George and Gus Polis and their wives, and one of the kitchen cooks that I enjoyed working with, but most people didn't, but I did, was Perry. I don't even know Perry's last name, but Perry worked in the kitchen. He was a good cook, but he could come off as kind of cranky, but as long as you were on his good side, you were, and I always was, so I enjoyed working there. Today we're here at the Golden Museum talking with Sam Patera.
Okay, I was born in India. I don't know about the time, but 25th April 48. I came here, my aunts sponsored my dad. My dad's come 66 and we came 2 years later, 68. So he moved to Donald for work. So I worked in Lake Cochin about a year and a half. Then Dad wanted us to move in Donald. So I moved with Donald in 1970, March, sometime in March. And that's how it go after that. Built a house in Golden. Got married here in Golden. Kids. Since then, we live here. Never leave Golden after that.
You have a really, really lovely wife.
We've been married for, I can't even count.
You were married in 72?
72 to about the 47 year. Married for 47 years. Never have we argued, nothing. Love each other. Really good life. Good life partner.
Do you see a time when you might move away?
I don't think I'm going to leave Golden. I'm going to stay here. Never, probably a week here and there. That otherwise, I'm going to stay in Golden. Never, not going to plan, and not yet, but never know for tomorrow what's going to happen. But my plans, I'm going to stay in Golden.
I was born at the Nicholson CPR section house, which is just by the south of the Nicholson Bridge, and that's where my dad and family lived for quite a few years. And I was born with the help of a midwife, and I think it might have been Mrs. Franson. I've thought about that, and I wasn't too sure about that. Yeah, and that's where it started. In a little log cabin by the river. Is that what I was supposed to say?
And who were your parents?
Mom was Mary, Maria, and Dad was Francesco. Yeah. And he came in 1925 to this valley, and Mom in 1935. And Mom's uncle came in the 1880s, and he was the one that sponsored Dad, and of course then Dad's. But Mom and my older brother and sister over.
So was there a gap in the ages between your siblings then? Because
well,
of the
my
distance?
older brother and sister were only a couple years apart, and then I was, I would have been about 8 or 9 years, because my dad came in 25. Yeah, about 10 years. Yeah, and then there was 3 more.
That was quite common, wasn't it? That the husband would come ahead and then, because I've talked with other families who have that kind of an age gap, and for the same reason, that it took the husband a while to save up the money to bring the rest of the family over.
You're probably making 35 cents an hour. Yeah. And I have no idea why my great uncle Tony came to Golden. You know, you wonder why did these people end up here?
Yeah.
You know, Dad and Mom, of course, they were sponsored, so they came here. But Uncle Tony?
Your dad, because he was Italian, that he had to make trips to town to report
To the police, yes.
Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, his guns were confiscated because they were afraid he might become a terrorist in today's language. Arm all the Italians in the valley or something, I don't know. But after a while, the policeman didn't worry about it. It was a provincial police, and he used to come out and have coffee with Mom and Dad. Just to check in instead of Dad having to go in all the time.
Right.
The details are a little vague because I was just 5 or 6 years old.
But he had to report on a regular basis, didn't he? Like into town. So it changed a lot.
Yeah, my Mom, I remember there was a little bit of a hillside
next to the house, and she'd plant her cucumbers there, and it'd take over the whole hill, you know. And nobody dared go inside there. She had to go in and pick the cucumbers. Because there was an old wives' tale that if you touched them and played with them and disturbed them before you picked them, they would get sour.
Did your parents have any other superstitions that you'd like to share?
Oh, I just thought of another one. Down below our place here, there used to be a forest of spruce and birch. And every fall, there were two kinds of mushrooms that grew there. Latade, which means milk, right? They were the white ones. And then there was the unchirus, red ones, right? And we'd go down there amongst the trees and pick them. And then Mom would put them in the big crocks, right? Put a weight on top. And did she add vinegar? But she had to stir them with a red hot poker, which drew out the poison.
Oh my goodness.
And then what did she do with them? Like, did you consume
Oh no,
them?
we ate them.
You
know.
ate them.
Yeah, take the lid off, get a scoop, and fry them with your omelet or whatever, right? Beautiful. And now they've all disappeared because the forest was cut. The spruce trees were all cut. And every spring, dandelions.
It's supposed to be a really good liver cleanser, those
Yes,
dandelions, right?
Oh, the first thing we'd go around and lift boards. And under the boards there was a dandelion. They were yellow and white.
Yes.
Oh, those were delicious. Right? And then as the season got on, you went and picked them a little more mature. And she'd have a great big crock and sit there for hours cleaning the fuzz off the bottom, cutting the tough part off there. Olive oil and vinegar and buttered bread.
First of all, I'd like to say we come from the finest family there ever was. We had great mother and father, Grandma, who was a sweetheart. Uncle Joe was like a father to us, and Uncle Chris was a sweetheart too. I'm the youngest, best looking too, and I think we come from a great home. We knew the rules. We didn't follow them, but we knew them. I had many childhood dreams. My friend Vi and June Carlson were my closest friends, and Freddie Curvin. There was an old boat down by the river, and Vi and I were going to fix it up and sail around the world. And June said, "How will you get to ocean?" I said, "Just go in the water." And Vi said, "Is that all we have to do?" And I said, "Yeah." Not thinking of, there's many oceans. We spent hours down there. We weren't supposed to, because we weren't supposed to go down there without an adult. But I think that's why it was so much fun. And we used to play White Rabbit, and mainly on Dolly Curvin. Dolly, we were little buggers. We just had nothing but fun, and we'd get in fights. But we were always together, and we always went back together. I knew nothing but love. And that's the honest to God's truth. Our mom was an angel, I think. And she taught us to be kind to others. We had chores to do, which I usually tried to duck out of. And Lena, Mom would say, "You go dust the floors." And I'd go in and say to Lena, "No, Lena, Mom said you had to." "Well, how come you always get away with it?" I said, "Because I'm the baby." I was 11 when Dad died. He was in the Army until I was 4. So the girls knew him a little bit better than I did. And of course, the king of our family is George Richards. Betty only has a book and a half about him, but she's right on everything she's got. I don't have lots to say about the rest. Annie was a darling. Lena was a sweetheart. That's because I could dive her do some of my work. Betty was an ass, but a cute ass. But each one had a special thing. And Bert was the big brown-eyed one,
and everything had to be exact with her. And when she went to school, she was not late. Then there was Polly, who was late 45 times, and I lived on 9th, and the school was on 11th. So the teacher thought he didn't, and he said, I'm going to let you out 10 minutes earlier every day. You get here on time. Oh, yes, sir. And of course, he never did. And Freddie Kerwin said, well, I don't know how you get away with that. And I said, because I'm more intelligent than you. And then there used to be these 3 boys who would beat me up. And George was coming home from school one day, and I went, George, George, help me, help me. And he used to call me his little pygmy sister. He's, what the hell's wrong with you now? I said, they're going to beat me up. Who is? And I showed him. And he grabbed 2 of them, and he said, no, no, one at a time. And I beat the hell out of that kid, never stopped. And never had trouble with him again. But I got a little bit cocky, Colleen. And if I wanted the water fountain, I'd say, move. And this Michael Gleishman came to town, and he was there, and I said, move, it's my turn. He said, I'm not moving, I was standing here. And I thought, what in God's name am I going to do to get this kid to move? I said, I'll meet you after school. Well, he beat me up. I fell madly in love with him.
Actually, we forgot to mention that we were married in 1958
Yeah.
in Golden, and
6th of December, it was about
5 below.
25 below Fahrenheit, not
Yeah.
Celsius.
Yeah, that winter it went down to close to 50 below.
Yeah.
At one point in the winter, it was very cold winter. I don't know why we decided to get married in the middle of winter, but we did. Actually, we wanted to be married before the end of December because it comes off as income tax kind of thing. I think that was the main reason that
I think that's
in those days, if you were married before the end of December, you got to claim
There was
the
a lot
extra
of couples got
person.
married before the end of December, so they could claim
But it was
it too.
it was a very cold winter. I remember that.
I worked in Donald for 8 years. And lived there till 1965, till we bought a house in
town.
In town, got from Gordon Dakin on 12th Street, 11. It was 1128 12th Street.
Corner, 12th.
On the corner, 12th. And at that time, it was $6,000 or $8. I think maybe $8,000. That stuff. So, and now apparently, what I heard, that house was sold for about $200,000. So,
Yeah. Not by us.
I waited a few years.
Actually, we traded it for one out of
Traded.
town. So.
From one out of town. But anyway, yeah, we moved to town in '65. We still kept working in Donald. I was working at that time, working on the pond, and then he had two bandsaws or two sawyers there, and when Bill Myers came as a sawyer, I was the tail sawyer for him. And
that was after he fell in the pond in the middle of winter. I came home. You don't live that far away when you live in Donald and you work in the mill, but it was still a good couple of blocks. His pants and everything were frozen stiff by the time we got home.
It was about 30 below. And
I don't think it was 30. They didn't work
it
under
was
20.
cold anyway. So
I know it was very cold, but
1969, I took up barbering, and I went to Vancouver for 6 months, and came back here, and then there was, at that time, there was 2 barber shops. There was Matt Woodland had one, and Ken Bettina had another one, and I worked for Ken. In 1971, the long hair came in. I guess everybody looking at the Beatles, they had long hair, so I figured they should. Everybody else, Kelly Smith worked for Matt. He went to work for the highways, and I went back to the fiber plant. Worked there till '74, and bought the barber shop.
Well, you get fresh veggies and you know that there's no chemicals on them. There's just way too many chemicals nowadays used. Like, you know that tomatoes are picked green? And then they're put in containers and put ethanol gas on them to turn them red. Not to ripen, but to turn red. If you raise all your own veggies, you're going to be a lot healthier and a lot more flavor. And the reason I got into so many pickling cukes is I couldn't get any good ones here. I used to go to Creston every year and get pickling cukes, so then I started, well, I'm going to try it. Had success and people heard. And one picking last summer was 300 pounds. And that's every 3 to 4 days you got to pick. And they go because you can't get a decent pickling cuke in town. I just like to garden. I hate doing housework.
Yeah.
I just soon be outside putting around. Like my tomato plants are like that. The ones I started the 1st of February, and then I start in the middle of March, and I just transplanted them. I sell quite a few tomato plants, pepper plants. I got to start my pumpkin plants and squash, and then I start my corn at the 1st of May inside, and then transplant it. All in, and then when I transplant, it's all into black plastic, so I don't have weeding.
Right.
Yeah. Black plastic or carpet. All the peas are in carpet. So all you gotta do is weed down the pea. Just where the peas are planted, down the middle, there's no weeds.
What is the best way to grow a tomato plant from seed?
Well, you gotta... I plant mine in the middle of March for the outside. And I put them in 3-inch pots once I transplant. And then they go out around after the 1st of June in a red plastic, in the red mulch. Instead of black plastic, I use red mulch. It helps to. And of course with the good old cow poop and the chicken poop. And when I transplant with fertilizer water. And that's the only fertilizer, they get outside of the compost, out of the... And last year I got beauties. Pound and a half, and no blemish.
Nice.
That's a new seed I got. Beautiful. Nice tasting too. Yeah. Good taste.
And what about pumpkins? Because this year I want to grow pumpkins, and what do I need to know about that little journey?
Same thing, just good dirt, compost. I start them, well, I'll be starting mine next week or so in the house. Transplant them out in June in black plastic again. I just let them go. But generally I get 30 to 40 pumpkins a year off of 6 plants.
I've always started my cucumbers in advance, but you said not to do that.
No, straight in the garden. Because they're only about 45, 50 days. And cucumbers don't like to be transplanted. So I just plant them out first part of June. Sometimes they don't come up for 2 or 3 weeks. Then all of a sudden they pop up and away they go. And we're picking by the 1st of August.
Do you maintain the belief that the 24th of May is the weekend you should put everything in the ground?
Somewhere around that, depending on the weather. Sometimes you can plant a little early. Last year we were past that.
Yes. What kinds of things do you can every year?
Oh, okay, we can beans, beets, pickled beets, dill pickles, gherkins, relish, hot sauces. What else is down there? Tomatoes. Oh, you name it. We can pretty well we hardly buy any canned stuff.
Yeah.
I recycle. I like to recycle. And we take it in once a week. And sometimes there's not even a can in it. There might be lids for my jars, but there's no cans. I have this much space down there for the bought stuff, the bought cans.
Yeah.
And the rest is all, like Colleen says, it's awesome.
He always liked any kind of junk.
He's always like, doesn't matter. When Eddie was, he was 12 years old when he got his
Oh,
first.
that's what, yeah, now I remember.
It was him and
It was
Eddie.
over that Pioneer Club in Vernon. You know, the OK Ranch.
The spoil machine.
And then we joined the Pioneer Club. And that's when I started collecting taking tractors down there. And at that time, there I could restore about 3 a year. And then now I'm lucky if it takes 3 years to restore one. Kind of works that way. But then my grandson keeps me so busy doing other things too, and restoring other stuff. Now, like last year, we restored seed drill and a binder and a thrash machine and all that last summer. We even did a little thrashing. And then I grew a couple acres of grain.
Yeah, when Eddie was 12, and Eddie's 23 now, so that's
Yeah,
when
that's what it started. We were all collecting tractors from the Pioneer Club. That's I
You
remember
were
just then.
doing
That's why I started.
Yeah.
But I always collected stuff anyway. Well, I kind of collected everything. Eh? So, back-a-tans to cameras and a lot of old tools. But
there's some stuff in there he doesn't even know what it is.
there's, like you've probably noticed it from here too, that 10, 15 years ago, you could go to an auction sale and buy a box full of old tools for $10, $15, $20. Eh? Now you're paying over $100 for one wrench. Their price is going up. If I had it, like now, I couldn't do it because you couldn't afford to buy them stuff. Any auction, I can't buy nothing anymore at the auction sale. Go way too high. Yeah. But then that's when I got started on it. And in them days.
But he has old butter churns, and he has the thing for fixing tires on the old Model A's. And, you know, he's got such a variety that...
You know, when we have the other farm machinery too.
Oh yeah, there are all kinds of farm machinery.
Plows, and, which my grandson has all restored there, and they all work. That's all we did last year when we plowed it, was all with that old stuff.
Sewing machines, he's got, I don't know how many.
Quite a plow, a sewing machine.
What else you got there?
A lot of cameras.
Yeah, you got cameras.
Kitchen stuff too.
Yeah, yeah. There's lots of things.
Scales.
That people don't.
I even got some scales off of you.
Yeah. Yep. But a lot of things that people don't know what they are. But people from Europe do. People from Europe are really, really interested in the old stuff. Really. Not only the older people, but the younger people too. Because everything was gotten rid of over there in the war. And
All of that's the most interesting.
One thing that
I
they
got a spinning wheel from Denmark.
Yeah, I got that spinning wheel. But one thing that the people from Europe didn't know what they were, and that's the old ice cream makers. They thought they were butter churn.
You had, I don't know if you still have it, but you had an old stagecoach.
Yeah. I've how many buggies? 7 buggies.
7 buggies. And 1 sleigh.
Diplomat buggy. That, last year, no, the year, what was it, year before?
2 years. 2 years ago.
Rail and I, we painted up a tractor, each piece, and then I hooked, we've changed the drawbar on them, and I hooked the stagecoach behind mine, and he hooked the Democrat buggy behind his, and I packed all the groom and all the best men to the wedding in a stagecoach behind the tractor, and he brought all the bride and all the bridesmaid in the Democrat buggy.
That was for Lisa's wedding.
That went over really good. The last couple of years hasn't been so much, but before that.
Well, he wasn't feeling good the last couple of years, so he didn't.
Well, then the weather got us so bad, and it snowed in there. Both years we got them bad snowstorms at the start.
You need to start decorating something like that about October. Beginning of October.
Well, we make the mistake of waiting till Halloween, because you would do a different decoration, and then you get the storms and it kills you. But other one before that, it was good. Like one year, it never snowed to put near Christmas, and I had like so everywhere. The light bill for what, 1 month was extra over $400. Extra. I had so many lights going that I blew the transformer on the corner.
Yeah.
The lights went out, and they come and hooked it up, and it blew again, and then so they had to go back to town to get a heavier duty one to put in there. That's how many lights I was burning. I said, "Oh, I don't know what's the matter. But I said, what's come with burning all these out? Because it's right just 100 yards down the road where it was. And it wasn't it? It was the big fuse deal on the power line.
Yeah.
It wasn't really the transformer. He said, I don't know. He said, all the women in Nicholton must turn their hot plates on at the same time. He says, he never caught on because my lights were shining. He never caught on. And I was blowing a fuse on the main line.
Chobator out at the farm?
No.
Oh, okay. He owned the property next to our property. And he lived in an old log cabin. And just a one-room cabin. And it had bars on the windows to keep the bears out. And there was a stream right outside his front door. And that's where he got his water. And he grew strawberries all in there. But he was in his late 70s when we moved out there. And he had come from Romania in 1919 after the uprising in Romania. And he had never heard from his family since the time he came to Canada. And he had a gold mine up in the mountain behind his place, and there wasn't enough gold there to make it worthwhile, you know. But he had gold teeth, both top and bottom.
Wow.
And he could tell you stories about this valley, you know, in this town, like you wouldn't believe. And but anyway, as he got older, Leo used to go over there all the time from the time we moved there. Leo was 16 when we moved there. And Leo used to ride over because he used to go into town twice a year. Oh, Big Mike did. We called him Big Mike. And just to get enough groceries to do them, you know, for the winter or for the summer or whatever. And that was the only time he left his place. And so Leo would go over and see if he needed anything or if he was all right, you know, and that. And then Leo would take him into town if he needed to go and whatever. And then we moved him over to, Dick Gondik had some cabins in Donald. So he offered him a cabin in Donald. So he moved in there because he was getting pretty bad. You know, he was nearly 80 then, and he wasn't very well. So he stayed there for, I think, about a year, and he wasn't happy there at all. He didn't like it in the town of Donald at all. So then we moved him to our place. We had a cabin on the place and right near the house. And we moved him there, and I would go over all the time and make sure, you know, take him food over and look after him. But he'd leave the doors open, let the birds all fly in, and they'd nest up in the ceiling of the of the cabin, and they'd poop all over the place. But he was the only man I ever saw that could chew snus and gum at the same time.
Oh my goodness, what a combination.
And he'd spit, you know. And he had a cupboard that was beside his chair, and all down the side of it would be spit, you know. And I'd clean that every week, you know.
Oh, boy, you were a good friend.
Yes, that's for sure. And I'd go in there once a week and give it a good clean, you know, and clean up all the bird poop, and of course he'd let all the dogs in, you know, and he'd sit there with them all up on his bed, and but he was a wonderful old man. I'm sure there's a lot about him in the museum.
I can't say I've ever even heard his name before.
Really?
So yes, so I appreciate you
Did you ever
sharing
hear
this
of
with
Little
me.
Mike?
No.
Little Mike, well, he lived in the cabin after Big Mike moved out. And his wife was a prostitute.
Oh.
Yeah. And they had a son. And she used to, you'd see her coming down the road about once a month. And she'd just open my back door and push the kid in. And when she first did it, he was about 2 years old. And she'd just walk off, take off and come to town. And she'd be in town for about 10 days. And the little guy would be with me the whole time. And she did that until, well, I don't know where, she went off to Vancouver, I think. And he got sick, and so, but anyway, I hadn't seen him for years. And then his dad died, and they had the funeral at our church. And when the choir came in and went up into the choir loft, here he was, you know, sitting in the front seat. And he saw me, and the tears just streamed, and he started to grin, you know, and he was like, I would say it was about 30 then. And, but after the funeral, he came and he gave me a big hug, and he was so happy to see me. And he told me, he said, you know, the happiest years of my life were spent at your house. And he said, the memories that I have there are just amazing. He said, if it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't have gone to school. As it was, he went to university. He got his degree. He was working for Indian Affairs because his mother was native. And he was working for the government, Indian Affairs, and had done well for himself. And I told him, I said, I'm so proud of you. You know, I appreciate that so much. And he said, well, it's all you're doing. He said, and the example that your kids set for me, you know. And they just welcomed him like he was another member of the family, you know.
Yeah.
Poor little guy.